Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. I am here today to chat with some colleagues about a horrible event that occurred last week in Fort Worth, Texas. An athlete drowned in an open water event as part of the CrossFit Games network. And I wanted to chat particularly with some people who have exposure to working at these types of events, responding in terms of lifeguards and these frequency of drowning incidents. And so I'm very happy today to welcome Katie Cleasby, Stephane, and Dan to chat about this event in particular and open water or for-profit events in general.
My name is Dr. Katie Cleasby, and the founder and CEO of Recspert. And I also am deeply involved in understanding how experienced lifeguards make decisions in open water triathlons. I just finished a dissertation, and so we're doing some work here with Dan and Stephane to create kind of the first training for open water lifeguards guarding these types of activities.
And I will link back to a chat that we had a couple months ago about Katie's dissertation and an excellent conversation we had about some of the injuries that occur in the events that she studied.
Everyone, I've been involved with Katie as far as developing an online program. We also have an open water safety training program we've been doing for probably a couple of decades or so, and we've been working a lot of water safety for open water events, triathlons, open swims, lifeguard competitions.
My name is Stephane Ribeck, and I'm based in St. Louis, Missouri. I run a company called Backyard Lifeguards, and we have a water rescue side for non-pool events. So we also do triathlons, open water swims. We've done adventure races like mud runs and stuff, but we provide lifeguard services for private locations and special events. And when the events are of a large scale, we also provide the water safety plan and liaise with EMS and fire and any other agencies that may be on site.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I am definitely a newbie. I have never competed in one of these adventure races. I was definitely really upset to receive this tip-off from a CrossFit colleague, actually, a pool professional here in Alberta who participates heavily in CrossFit in their life. And they sent me the initial press release.
Don Fall, CEO of CrossFit, DONFAUL.
Dave Castro, Director of the CrossFit Games, CASTRO.
And I have a brief statement to share with you this morning. CrossFit is deeply saddened by the death of one of our athletes during the swim portion of our event this morning. We're doing everything in our power during this tragic time to support the family, to support our community. We are collaborating and working very closely with the authorities on the follow-on investigation. We've canceled the rest of today's events and activities in the CrossFit Games, and we'll continue to be focused on supporting our community and the family through this tragic set of circumstances. And with that, I'll hand it over to FD.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out. Just want to take the time at first to let everybody know our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out with the family members that were affected today in this tragic event, the CrossFit community and the community here in Fort Worth, Texas. So we got called out this morning originally about 8 o'clock for an assist PD call that had gotten changed, the call types along the way, and it ended up being a participant in the water that was down and hadn't been seen in some point in time. The fire department came out only as a search and rescue type resource. We were not here on scene prior to the initial 911 call for help. We had our dive teams come out. We had our arson investigators come out with their drones trying to help locate the missing person. And we were ultimately able to bring that body out of the water just a little over an hour of when we put our first diver in the water.
So let's start with Katie first. What was your initial reaction to hearing this, and were you surprised?
I mean, my initial reaction was anger for the lack of awareness and supervision watching this video, with having two lifeguards on either side and not understanding what's happening right in front of their eyes. And it just attributes back to this consistent problem that keeps occurring for these race directors not implementing, safety standards, or having trained professionals, or having the lifeguards have certain amount of training what to look for. And unfortunately, this is the time of year that we see it happen in August. Typically, the longer races happen. These are when the endurance races happen on the North American side in the summer. And I can only speak to the research that I've done in the triathlon area. And I know Stephane's can contribute to actually being and having her services guard these type of events. But it's anger, it's sadness, it's embarrassment, and it's a call for change.
Stephane, can you share with us what it's been like to work on some of these adventure events? Because I know for myself personally in my lifeguard years, I studiously avoided volunteering or assisting with anything like this because I had my own concerns in terms of the irregular structure or the lack of support. But can you share with us what you've experienced on the ground at these types of events?
Well, to your point about kind of a loose structure or lack of support, one of the things that I think a lot of these event directors really want are lifeguards. And so we keep our lifeguards behind the velvet rope. You cannot have our personnel unless you have our organization and management services, because we're not putting trained professionals out there to not be able to do well if they don't have a system in place. Every other place that lifeguards work, they work under a system, an emergency action plan, a management system, something that provides some backup and some coordination when they need to respond to an emergency. And we early on found that those things were lacking. The perspective of a lot of event directors was they needed a temp agency for lifeguards. They needed a bullpen somewhere where they could reach the personnel so that they could check that box and say, yes, we have lifeguards out there. But there's a real limited understanding among a lot of event producers that the personnel alone is not sufficient to create the type of safety that you would find ideal for mitigating risk. So that, I find it interesting that you mentioned that and why there's a lot of hesitation among people in lots of areas of the country. There are a lot of aquatic supervisors and directors who say, I'm not volunteering for that. I'm not suggesting that my colleagues or staff volunteer for that because I can't guarantee them the same kind of support that I provide for them here at the workplace. That's what we created. We created a system that we sell, and it comes with personnel. We did not find it to be a positive experience for athletes or race directors or us or our staff when we weren't operating that way, when we were just sending lifeguards to events.
And I want to go to you and get your perspective of
Relationship is I work for an actual race company, work water safety for these events. We recruit swimming pool lifeguards, beach lifeguards from throughout the state. We all meet up during the races. We get together early. We hope we have proper communication ahead of time with the different lifeguards that are showing up and volunteer water safety staff. So we're recruiting kayakers. We're recruiting, I've recruited nurses, I recruited EMT friends, and in particular beach lifeguards from throughout the state. Because they're valuable, because they possess the skills we're looking for, working paddle boards, working on sit on top kayaks. And then we'll mesh everybody together. We give them assignments. We do a briefing in the morning. A lot of these are swimming pool lifeguards that show up. So we're trying to help them understand what we're trying to do out in the open water. So we divide our swim course into zones. We assign them zones and specific tasks, and we issue out equipment. Sometimes they bring their own equipment. We'll have lifeguards stationed on boats. We'll also have fire and EMS crews on motorized watercraft, and we'll have law enforcement as well. And they're essential for extractions and for maintaining the boat traffic in general, keeping the swimmers safe. So that's what we've been doing. We started a training program to work with local swimming pools and pool lifeguards, and it's free. We've been doing it. We're doing it for 10, 15, 20 years or so, where we actually have an open water safety team training. And when they've completed this training, they've bridged from a swimming pool lifeguard to work open water events. And then we are hoping that they're going to then come back and work these events. We found it's helped out with recruiting a great deal, because again, we're getting people from all over the state just showing up in the morning, ready to work an event. So we're trying to organize everybody in just about an hour and a half period of time. So creating a standard of training, which will also create a standard of care for these lifeguards, because just like Stephanie was saying, when we have swimming pool lifeguards or beach lifeguards, they're working. We have EAPs. We have standards of operation in general. So what we've been trying to do is create these standard of operations. Everybody has a role. You have an assignment, and one of the biggest things is we have communication methods. Using marine radios. We're working on the open water, so we're basically salt water, whether we're on the bay, river, ocean. At a lot of our events.
I'm happy to hear that there is so much work being done at different locations by different groups and private enterprise to prevent this from happening. But in terms of the event that actually happened last week in Fort Worth, Texas, there is a variety of videos available online. I will link to a few of them. I can't guarantee that they will all still be online at the time that you click on them because of bootleg, people recording recordings. But I wanted to chat with you guys about what you have seen or what you see from the video footage that has become available from different sources. Myself, when I was looking at the footage, the first thing that drew me, lifeguards, if we're calling them that, on the paddle boards were not clearly visible, not clearly, there was no uniform, there was no kit that I could see. Katie, what observations did you have?
First of all, I wanted to understand the cross games as a whole and what makes up, and kind of taking a couple steps back from that question, that we know in triathlons, the reason why we put the swim first is because it's one of the most dangerous and for many other reasons. But so I immediately researched, like, okay, I need to understand the CrossFit Games. And before I answer this question, so I went through, and it's a series of 4 days, and also, if you think about the athletes to themselves, like triathletes are generally, we're looking at cardio endurance, like lean. And some of these CrossFit Game athletes, you're looking at dense muscular endurance, muscular strength individuals, looking to be the fittest man on earth, the fittest female on earth for that title. And this is part of that. So they have them run first and then get into the water, which is a recipe for, I think, disaster anyways. The positioning too, they were very low on the paddle boards and unable to kind of have the head on a swivel and that general awareness. I couldn't believe that the gentleman standing on the shore couldn't see too. It wasn't saying anything. That we saw active drowning, the definition of active drowning, bobbing up and down, and flailing under the water for not making forward progress. These are all cues that when I did my study in the triathlon world, that were consistent across 22 lifeguards all across the United States. Shocking to see that these are textbook cues.
What about you? You've seen a few of these events. What were your thoughts on seeing the footage that you've seen?
Well, my emotional response to the footage is mixed, because there's a feeling of helplessness that goes with that I find incredibly frustrating, because it already happened and you didn't have any sort of positive impact on it. I also have to say that I wasn't surprised, and like Katie, I got angry. First, with regard to the run being preceding the swim, in Texas heat, the physiological response of the body would not be agreeable to that type of schedule. You're elevating your core body temperature and then you're plunging it into cold water. So similar to the way that ice freezes when the water starts out as hot, your molecules are moving, they bond a lot faster, so it slows you down very immediately. Entirely possible for an athlete whose focus, as Katie said, was on muscle development, would find themselves really, really struggling. The water feels like glue as you're trying to swim through that when you go from hot to cold. That suggests to me that no one in the planning decision-making room about this event thought about that, or maybe had that type of knowledge or expertise. The second thing I want to comment on is about the lifeguards. And I really am hesitant. I'm trying not to show air quotes when I say this, because one thing in USA Triathlon, which I imagine may be similar in the other endurance events, is that there is no definition of lifeguard. There is no stated expectation that the person be certified or previously trained by a nationally recognized body that presents the knowledge and skill set for identifying drowning, interrupting it, and then performing a rescue. And so I feel like that needs to be said, because that is a lifeguard's whole goal, right? Like to survey the area, to be vigilant and watch for those early signs of distress. Every single person who is a lifeguard who saw that video saw those obvious signs of swimming distress, then progress to active drowning. So my question is, were the people who are tasked with supervising that swim, and I don't mean supervising like the leaders, I mean the people, the lifeguards, people, I don't want to say posing as lifeguards because I don't know what their certification status was and everything is alleged, but the people who were acting in the capacity of lifeguards. Lifeguarding is not an activity, it's a qualification. Did they possess that qualification? So did they know how to recognize drowning? Would they have known how to interrupt it? Because it appeared to me that everyone was very nonplussed by what we were all seeing on screen as presenting as obvious. In this case, drowning wasn't interrupted. So it begs a lot of these other questions. Was their positioning appropriate and they just didn't see it? Or were they not trained to see it anyway? Or did someone just say, it's easy, they're athletes, it's going to be fine, all you have to do is stand there, you'll be good? Because in that case, to me, so when I go into my depths of anger include, was this a whole false pretense here? Was someone simply dressing people up to look like lifeguards, providing that image of safety without the substance of safety? One of the things about a lifeguard, and I hope that Dan would agree, is lifeguards are easily recognizable as lifeguards. So they, when our team goes out there, they're in bright yellow, and everyone on, if you're trying to mitigate risk and also reduce anxiety, someone who's nervous is going to be looking out at that swim course going, okay, I know where the lifeguards are. The other thing I want to add, and I know I've gone on for a little bit, is it causes participants to not be able to trust the safety that's there. They don't know the difference between volunteers on stand-ups or in kayaks or lifeguards who are legitimate and trained. So I feel like it does a disservice to the athlete and a disservice to our profession, because somebody out there somewhere is like, well, that lifeguard didn't do anything, but maybe that wasn't a lifeguard.
I go to Dan to get your thoughts rather on the equipment piece, because for me, the video footage I saw presented an individual standing on a paddle board with a paddle. I did not see any rescue equipment, no tube, no ring buoy, no throw bag. So Dan, what are your thoughts on the equipment or lack thereof from what you could see?
The thing we try to do is to have multiple options when it comes to open water rescue. So the paddle boards or a kayak is usually just a platform for us. You're going to have a piece of rescue equipment, flotation device, whether it be a rescue tube, rescue can, which we use on our beaches, and we're going to present that as a rescue device to the swimmer or water rescue victim. In some cases, we have to be pretty assertive and put the piece of equipment right in the person's hands. Grab it, hold on. We actually, in our training, we instruct the lifeguards to be very assertive. Don't want that swimmer to grab the board. We don't want them to grab the kayak, because then it leaves us immobile. Go ahead and get control of the victim. Stay in control of your platform, which would be a kayak. Sit on top kayaks are excellent. Rescue boards, paddle boards, surfboards are excellent. And then you can take it from there. A lot of times we'll have a paddle boarder work their way into a swim zone. This wasn't much the same type of swim zone that we work in triathlons. Contact, get control of the victim, and then another type of watercraft could come pick up the victim and transport them out. Brightly colored clothes, training, communication, use of whistles, all of these things are essential. Rescue boards aren't like a regular surfboard. They're not gonna. We don't have them that blend in. They're not a cool color blue, and our uniforms are not a cool color blue because we blend in. We want to be brightly colored. A lot of times it's going to be our beach guards that we use are in fluorescent yellow shirts. You know, we stand out. But our rescue boards are also yellow. So that everything is standing out. So as Stephanie was pointing out, we want our lifeguards to stand out. They shouldn't be blending in. Swimming pools, we have the advantage of going under, diving down, pull the victim up. Because it's chlorinated water, we can see 10, 15, 20 feet in depth. We don't have that advantage in the open water. So we have to be on top of it. We have to be very, very, very proactive and assertive. This is great conversation, and it's all an opportunity for us to educate. To help prevent further incidents.
ESPN did a documentary on triathlon swim deaths in 2013. It's fascinating if anybody hasn't seen it.
There really weren't that many swimmers in the water. So that is where I was particularly concerned. In the video footage that I saw, it had an overhead view of a relatively small lake. It's able to be all in one camera angle, but likely very cold because it's uncirculated water. We're in Texas. It's August, so it's going to be 90, 100 degrees, even early in the morning. And the clarity of the water is a concern. And yet I am concerned the fact that there were not that many heads in the water at the time of this swim. I would have to go back and count, but it was my impression that there were less than 20 people actively engaged in the swim. And then in the zoomed in part of the video, 4 or 5 people who were approaching the end of their swim. So to lose track of a swimmer in a relatively small number of people in your zone, if all of these other precautions were taken, is concerning to me if they are trained as a lifeguard.
The same thought. And the other thing I was thinking about is training people to notice these early signs of distress, often when the swimmers are in a pack. So the water's turbulent, and so clarity is a problem, but turbidity is also a problem. And so we were able to observe textbook drowning because we did not have any of those other factors that were in the way, which then of course leads us to go, then how was it missed? And one of the things we train our lifeguards to do, when your water isn't clear, you really have to manage the surface area so that when that person starts to submerge, you have seconds to notice where their bubbles might still be or where that surface is disturbed. And a lot of times at the start of a triathlon, when the pack is really thick, you don't get that. So the fact that they had all that and still missed it is very, very troubling.
Even organizations that might teach head counting, which I know is not every lifeguard training agency, but certainly in larger pools that I've worked at, we're teaching head counting actively at larger numbers. And this is not a big head count number. This is less than 20 people in what I could see. And so to lose track, I'm wondering, as I have done as a lifeguard, well, I saw them. Then I think about them 10 seconds later. Where did they go? He's no longer there. We have questions about the response, which I hope we can learn about later as the case or as the facts become apparent. The topic I want to talk about, if we can, is how the athletes themselves may perceive these water activities or these water challenges when they either participate in these adventure races or something more complex. During what you guys have encountered rescuing people or dealing with athletes that are not able to complete their races, what was their self-reflection?
Never seen a CrossFit gym with a pool. Swimming is different. And it's like triathlon. It's often the shortest, or it's an add-on, and it separates the athletes from the swimmers. And to incorporate swimming as part of an all-around competition of athleticism, I don't know that that's really understood by the people who are making that decision to incorporate it. I used to get these questions all the time when I worked for the American Red Cross. People would sign up their child for a lifeguarding class and I would say, well, can he swim or can she swim? Well, he's an excellent athlete and he went to state for basketball and all these things. Like, that is not swimming. And finally I started saying, and I realize this is slightly off track, but finally, the Red Cross came out with a study that said that a certain percentage of lifeguards had formal swimming lessons as children. So I started asking people that question, like, well, 60% of lifeguards remember having formal swimming lessons. Do you remember taking lessons, or do you remember bringing your child to swim lessons? And that really changed the understanding of the conversation. So I think the perception of athletes is that I can swim, it's no problem, no big deal. And then they sort of lack the understanding that this is a different type of environment than maybe where they normally swim. Or they go, whoa, I can't swim, but the culture supports them and say, it's no big deal, you'll be fine. For a long time I heard, well, I just need to survive the swim, and then I'll get on my bike and I'll make my forward progress. And I would ask people, well, have you considered the alternative? Don't think they know that swimming in a non-pool environment is very, very different from a pool. You don't get the same kind of cues.
Right away, that makes me angry because, the research doesn't lie. 79% of deaths and fatalities that occur in triathlons are in the swim portion. All you have to do is go to triathlonfatalities.com and see the first 10 in the last year, swim. And you look at, these are Ironman athletes. These are people, the best of the best in the world. There is nothing, longer than an Ironman as far as the triathlon distance. And they still, other things can happen, the cardiovascular, you can have a heart attack, panic, anxiety, it all sets in. Even the best highly trained athletes, panic can set in, and it's a different world. It's murky, people are swimming on top of each other, over, under, for someone to say, obviously there's some emotion attached to this, like a sideliner to say, oh, they know what they're getting into. Sometimes you don't, and you don't know until you're out there, and that panic sets in, and you're relying on the trust of the race officials and the management to support you. And I don't think a lot of people know it may not be what they thought it was.
And I think there's a big piece that's missing in terms of awareness of different environments. And so when I think about this individual who died, sadly, they were from Europe, and lakes in Europe may be a different temperature, different water quality, different experience. And when you have these high performance athletes who are traveling the world to attend different events, whether it's the CrossFit Games, whether it's an Ironman, they do come from different countries and different experiences in their open water swimming or their pool training. And I don't think the event directors, I think they pick a location, a host city that's going to have, hotels and great events, and it's going to be affordable, or that's the right time of the year, there's the right tax breaks. But I don't know how much education is happening in the organization who's the event on, or to athletes saying, this is Texas in August. That alone was very concerning to me in terms of the timeline of an event. Having lived in Texas for just 1 year, but growing up in a colder climate like Canada, Texas heat is no joke, period. And then you couple that with the culture of, push through, brute force, you can do this. I can only imagine that there were probably other near misses attributed by the timing, the day, the location, the altitude, that sort of thing. There's so many factors.
I want to add something else too that you mentioned about the water. I presumed earlier that the water was colder than the air, and that's probably the case. But also I noticed that the water was dark, so it probably trapped a lot of heat. It probably wasn't 103 degrees, but it was probably very, very hot for someone to be swimming in, especially if they already had an elevated heart rate and elevated body temperature. Fran Crippen, who drowned in the United Arab Emirates because, the water was incredibly hot, also 1-to-1 ratio, and he was lost. One of the things I find regarding triathlon is that increasingly I see events moving to ungoverned bodies of water. So you used to have the Miami Ironman would be in the ocean off Miami Beach, and you would get Miami Beach Ocean Rescue providing the water safety services. I notice that there are more and more events being held in places where they get to make their own safety. And I don't know if that's by design, but why would you move away from Miami Beach into the Intercoastal Waterway when you separate yourself from all those safety resources? Is that a cost factor? Are you presuming that you're going to get more people because the water's less unpredictable? I'm not sure.
A liability factor, and because of the sequence of events and the frequency of these deaths and drownings or near drownings. And, you know, I don't know the answer, but I would imagine that's coming into play. And so you do see some more in reservoirs or like bodies of water you wouldn't normally swim in, or they're just getting approval just for that day. And so to your point, Stephanie, you know, those guards who are on that beach every day know where the riptides are. They know where typically, you know, certain things might be happening. And so if you're coming to a brand new body of water you've never worked with before.
I think a less charitable way of looking at it is state by state, what is the liability piece in terms of a corporation that is staging an event? I don't know the exact liability statutes in Texas, but I think broadly we have a general understanding about individual freedoms and the way that Texas envisions its level of governance as an entity versus another location. So I do think it's really interesting that you can look at, you know, is it a prime tourist destination that people want to travel to, and so you'll have higher registration, or is it a place that is maybe easier to operate? There is less red tape. Or municipally speaking, when I was a municipal pool manager, the quote unquote red tape permitting required by the city to stage a road race or to stage an event that would require the closure of public access. How much did that cost? How much oversight was there? Or how much was a small town willing to, yeah, we'll give you a race permit for $1,500 that is making the profit margins more substantial for some companies over others.
Everything you just said makes a lot of sense. The more roads for a triathlon, the more roads and streets and driveways that you have to close down just to coordinate the biking portions and the running portions. And so all that comes into play, and how much law enforcement is going to be required and volunteers is going to be required for all of that. So that is probably a factor with the locations. Having an established beach patrol that's working a body of water is a huge advantage, because we already have communications, we already have equipment, we're already working with fire police in day-to-day jobs. So that's an advantage. I think we could all agree that the water safety for these swimming events, I'm not going to say it's an afterthought, but it doesn't usually take priority. And then the lifeguards and the quality of the lifeguards and who we're choosing to be out there to protect these swimmers is not the priority.
So I want to add 2 comments, and then we'll start to wrap up by going around and seeing how we can fix this. My interaction with CrossFit is limited to the documentaries of the CrossFit Games that I watched probably 10 years ago when they first came out. And one of the things that came up is that the athletes do not know the event before the day starts. First event would be presented and the second event would be presented, and they would have no knowledge prior to that moment of what the events for that day were. So part of me wonders if this athletes who drowned did not know and didn't have the opportunity. You don't opt out of the events. You do them to the best that you're able, and you get different points and different scores, and that contributes to the person who's made champion. And then the second piece, more just a comment to throw out there, is rapid onset. Oh, what is rope? Basically, this individual flew in from Europe to participate in this event in Texas. What impact, if any, did air travel closely preceding their participation in this event? Could it have been a contributing factor? I'm not a medical professional, but I know the state of Hawaii has been doing a lot of research and a lot of studies on tourists who fly to Hawaii across the Pacific Ocean and then experience drowning, which could have been exacerbated. How do we fix any of this?
It just goes back to the definition of a lifeguard, guarding someone's life. And you can have all the factors you want in the world, but it should be preventative, and it should be prevented. And we shouldn't even get to those factors or have a plan in place if those factors do arrive, such as a heart attack. And so it doesn't result in death, that we have EMS nearby and the protocols in place. I have a committee that we've compiled from the best of the best in the United States. And Stephanie and Dan and a couple other people are included as well, where we're we are coming up with the first kind of online app training to send out with different modules, folks who are guarding open water triathlons or open events such as this, try to prevent some of these drownings and these deaths. So at least they understand what's going on. Some of these lifeguards who are assigned, who are just, provided $100. I just need you to sit in a kayak. I know you're a local lifeguard. Send me your certification. We meet our protocols for insurance. Great. I've got 15 lifeguards. They're certified. Check, but it goes beyond that. So we're trying to create this and make this, something that everybody has to take on their phone, so that they have some knowledge of the decision making and what happens and what to look for going into this, because this can't keep happening each year. We have to do better.
I feel like water safety is the buzzkill of multi-sport. They don't really want us at their party. Because there's a cost associated with the information that we bring to the table. There's either a cost to the resources that would need to be present to ensure the safety of the athletes at the event, or there's a cost to events not being produced or athletes not signing up for them if they feel those safety services aren't there. So I feel like there's there's nothing to see behind the curtain. It's all great. And I would like to say that these athletes who sign up, who sign a waiver, and it's, participate at your own risk, cannot possibly appreciate the risk. And we need to educate them about what the risk is and let them know that as candidates for these types of events, they deserve care. Organizers on some level want to hide behind the waiver and want to hide behind pre-existing conditions as a reason for why these things occur, as opposed to, well, we need to do better. Like Katie said, we need to do better. We need to stop this from happening. These can't be the statistics in our event.
A training program, some sort of consistent, nationally accepted training program, so that lifeguards are meeting certain criteria before they are paid to work these events for the safety of our swimmers. So the whole idea is, if we have a curriculum that these certified pool lifeguards are going to bridge into a position, which would be an open water safety team position, or lifeguard, whatever role they are, whether they're on a kayak, whether they're on a rescue board, or they're on a motorized watercraft. So we're training these individuals. We've got a program. We've been doing it for quite some time, and there's a classroom training where we're teaching them concepts. We're teaching them the roles and responsibilities, and we're reinforcing the drowning victim recognition and instinctive drowning response that we learned from Dr. Frank Pia. And then we're taking them into the swimming pool, and we're introducing them to use of sit on top kayaks, rescue boards. We're teaching them some basic search and rescue skills. And keep in mind, we don't have to have masks and fins. We can just use a pair of goggles, for open water search and rescue, for running line searches. Very simple skills. And then we're tying it together where we're having them perform mock rescues. So just having a set curriculum that any lifeguard that goes and works these events, they've been trained at a certain level, a certain competency, so they can fit in. So if we had lifeguards who are trained at a certain level, so that they can go and fit into a team where whatever event they're working, they're trained at a similar level, we'd go a long way of protecting swimmers. And then having then the lifeguards, we should pay them if they're getting a higher level certification. We're looking forward to moving forward.
I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and I want to thank you for your time. Hopefully we can connect again on this matter in the future, and it is with improvements. I am maybe less cynical than all of you, because this is a new area of water safety for me. And although I'm not naive about some of these for-profit events, I do think CrossFit is a unique beast in terms of the network of people and how passionately it is a lifestyle for some of them, which is nothing against Ironman. I just mean that they're very interconnected. And the proof for me was this morning, the algorithm fed me a very famous CrossFit individual I remembered from the documentaries. And he was just so devastated and talking about how little he cared about the event, culminating the event this past weekend.
I have never been more disengaged from competition outcomes. I think for me, the only reason I chose to continue to compete was so that I could keep putting something on the floor. Like we've been shouting for years about safety concerns, only to be patted on the head and told we're just being hysterical and complaining, and this feels like it was only a matter of time. We've been pushing athletes in the wrong way. This isn't war, this is sport, and I feel like we've been trying to, for some reason, find the athlete's breaking point for too long, and we found it. People are angry and sad.
And so I really hope that there is more of a feedback loop within that organization, that people are more willing to really highlight that this can't keep happening because they value the sport, they value the group dynamic, and that this is not acceptable. So on that, thank you so much for being here. If anybody agrees with anything that we've said, please post a comment in the chat below. If we missed anything, if we got it wrong, let us know as well, and we can loop back and do this again.